Over the weekend, 60 Minutes aired an interview they had with President Joe Biden. And in the context of that interview, he felt the need to declare that the coronavirus pandemic is over. Now, he was speaking to Scott Pelley, and he said the following, quote, "The pandemic is over. The pandemic is over. We still have a problem with COVID. We're still doing a lot of work on it, but the pandemic is over." Now, he qualified the statement about the pandemic being over by saying that they're still doing a lot of work on it. But I want to remind you all that the federal government has certainly taken a step back from providing any type of aid to ordinary Americans, especially when it comes to testing. They're no longer sending free tests to people. Individuals who have no private insurance are very likely going to pay for vaccinations and boosters out of pocket. So to say that they're doing a lot of work is interesting because I don't know what he was referring to there. Even the CDC, in regard to the data that they're releasing, says that they're going to be scaling back considerably. Now, Biden pointed to maskless attendees at the Detroit Auto Show, where the interview was conducted, to make his case. And he says, if you notice, no one's wearing masks. Everybody seems to be in pretty good shape. And so I think it's changing, and I think this is a perfect example of it. Now, that led to a lot of backlash from progressives, including Mehdi Hassan, who says one of the many reasons they're not wearing masks is because people like Biden keep falsely telling them the pandemic is over. And I just want to give you one more point of criticism. Biden is saying the pandemic is over as transmission rates stay high, as Americans with long COVID outnumber immunocompromised Americans, as 4 million workers are sick, as at-risk people scream for safe access, transportation, and education. Make this make sense to me. And she does have a point, especially when you look at the number of Americans who are still dying from COVID, an average of 400 people a day. And I'm happy to get into that data with more detail in just a moment. But Cenk, I wanted you to jump in and share your thoughts.
Yeah, I'm really conflicted about this one. I don't think it's straightforward at all. In fact, to the point where we have a poll on it, I know that the poll lacks subtlety. But hear us out and then vote on it. And we'll put the link down below in the description box on YouTube and Facebook. It's at tyt.com/polls. Is COVID-19 pandemic over? Yes or no? Look, the part of the reason I mentioned the poll first, Hannah, is because with all the nuance notwithstanding, if I'm going to vote on that poll, I vote yes, it's over. So now let me explain. As I said earlier in the show on a different story, Biden is partly doing this to appease business interests. They want to be able to take away your sick pays and sick days and all that, right? So I'm not unaware of that, and I don't like that, right? But at the same time, COVID is not over, but the pandemic portion is over. So, if you've got a pre-existing condition or you're older, et cetera, and there's good reasons why you want to wear a mask, bless your heart. And if you ask me to wear a mask around you, I'll do it in a second. Happy to do it, okay? But otherwise, what are we gonna do? Are we gonna still quarantine? Are we gonna still wear a mask around even if we don't have any symptoms? No, of course not. That's absurd. And I think it's pretty close to the flu now, and we don't do that for the flu.
It's not.
Okay, all right. So
yeah.
So first give us the facts.
Yeah. I looked into the data because Cenk, just to be clear about where I stood, I mean, I thought that the number of people dying from coronavirus was pretty low, right? I thought maybe it's comparable to the number of people dying from like the common flu. If you believe that, you would be mistaken. So I specifically looked at CDC data. I wanted to compare data from the same organization, and they put out numbers in regard to people dying from the flu in the United States. And they looked at October 1st, 2021 through June 11th of 2022. And these are preliminary numbers. It's important to keep that in mind because as you can see, the number of flu deaths in this fiscal year is 5,000 to 14,000. So they're still looking over the data to determine what the exact number is, but that's the ballpark, right? Then I looked at the CDC data specifically for COVID deaths in the exact same period. And here's what we know. In that same period, there was a whopping 312,117 Americans who died from COVID, according to the CDC. So compare more than 300,000 Americans dying from COVID to, let's give it the highest estimate, 14,000 Americans dying from the common flu.
So that's a really good fact, and it's interesting, and it gives you good context. And overall, it does go a long way towards convincing me that we're not at the flu stage yet. But it has two giant holes in it. Number one, it's over a period of years where COVID was ranging. It's not talking about today, right? So if you had 5 to 14,000 flu deaths stretching all the way back into the middle of 21 to the middle of 22, yeah, of course the COVID deaths would be way, way higher, right? And then secondly, it also doesn't take into account the jackasses that aren't taking the vaccine, which are the great majority of the people who are dying. So if you want me to wear a mask while you're not taking a vaccine or wearing a mask, my answer is a super hard no.
Yeah, look, I get it and I understand the frustration. To me, it's not even about whether you wear a mask or not, right? I have no problem wearing a mask if I'm asked to wear it because I want people to feel safe, even if it's people who are being annoyingly stubborn and refusing to get the vaccine. My issue is the federal government taking a massive step back and pretending as if there's nothing going on, like everything's back to normal when it's not. And people need resources in order to, we want to encourage people to keep getting tested. And people are not gonna go out of their way and spend their limited resources on tests if they have to pay for them out of pocket. I'm concerned about the federal government backing off of providing that resource. I'm also concerned about the federal government completely backing off of providing compensation for the vaccine. So individuals who do not have private insurance won't have coverage and they'd have to pay for the vaccine out of pocket. And so if you think it was already difficult to persuade people to get vaccinated and boosted, it's gonna be even more difficult to do it. And you're right, Cenk. What is the motivating factor here? And at the end of the day, I think it's politics and it's to help Biden's corporate buddies out, and that's not okay.
Yes, but Anna, there's a couple more things there. Look, so first of all, is it mainly for business interests, as we talked about earlier in the show? Yes, because they want to be able to take away their COVID policies and point to a Democratic president and say, hey, it's over, so I'm not going to give you as many sick days anymore, right? So I know the primary reason behind it, and I'm against that. And I'm against cutting off the resources. But as a matter of optics, and I don't say that but lightly, I'm really against taking away the resources. So these days you have to repeat things like 8 times for people to not mischaracterize what you're saying. But as a matter of optics, if the Democrats are constantly screaming, oh my God, the pandemic is raging, when that's not the experience of real people in the country, it doesn't help. It doesn't look realistic. It frustrates people. It makes people think the Democrats are using it for political reasons. So we have to find a better balance here in terms of both the policy and the politics.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.